Trump's tariffs are not legal. In a late decision by the U.S. Court of International Trade on Wednesday evening, an Obama judge, a Reagan judge, and a Trump judge walk into a courtroom and overturn all of the tariffs. That's all, as in 100% or 145%, if that seems like a more fitting number for this story. Trump had used the 1977 federal economic emergency laws to impose these tariffs, and this three-judge panel, the U.S. Court of International Trade, said, sorry, tariffs were not among the weapons allocated to the president, even in the event of a federal economic emergency, which they did not prove, and no one bothered to prove any indication anywhere in any law, in the Constitution, anywhere else, any statute, anywhere, that the president had the right single-handedly to impose tariffs without the approval of Congress. They have given the Trump administration 10 days to halt all tariffs. The Trump administration has already appealed. What is interesting as a sideline to this is the corporations that were affected by these tariffs, including the ones that were pushed to the brink of true economic peril, did nothing about them. They knew these tariffs were illegal or, at minimum, illegally applied and did not have anything behind it legally, and they did nothing. They rolled over rather than challenge Trump in court. This is a series of states and other groups that sued and got these tariffs at least halted pending an appeal. In retrospect, perhaps it was a mistake by the Department of Justice under Trump's guidance to tell this U.S. Court of International Trade that it had no right to review the president's actions. It said this to this court repeatedly throughout this process. He got elected, that's the only law now round here premise. It did not go well for Trump in the slightest, no matter what happens in terms of the appeal. Presumably, the halting will be itself halted, and the 10 days to stop the tariffs will not go into effect until the appeal is heard. But who knows? Like everything else about this misbegotten presidency and this misbegotten man, the details remain left to be sorted out by others. He is in charge of one thing and one thing only: breaking shit. In a totally unrelated bit of timing, Elon Musk has now officially bailed out, saying, well, it was scheduled for this to be the time for him to bail out of douche or whatever that was called again. But he is now no longer associated with the government. They had been gradually fading him out anyway, to the point where, like the Cheshire Cat in the story, all that was left was his stoned grin. And we can now ask the question, remember Elon Musk? One final note here, pending, obviously, days of further litigation and bombast to come. How dare the judges never elected make a decision instead of our God Trump, who was elected in a minority vote by a minority of voters. One last note here. Stephen Miller, who is nominally has nothing to do with this particular aspect of the Trump would-be dictatorship, Stephen Miller announced this to his waiting world of human scorpions by retweeting the right-wing nebbish Benny Johnson. And I don't know if I can think of anything that says more authoritatively, I am a serious and powerful government figure that you should be afraid of. Nothing says that more resonantly than RTing a guy named Benny and adding to Benny's reporting, the judicial coup is out of control. Do you see what happens, Gretchen Whitmer? Do you see what happens, Tim Cook? Do you see what happens, Jake Tapper, Claire Shipman, Eugene Daniels, CBS News, Bob Iger? Do you see what happens when you let Trump... Well, if you know the movie The Big Lebowski, you know the twist on the rest of that speech. It's not pretty. It is, however, completely accurate. Stop capitulating to Trump. Stop negotiating with Trump. Stop appeasing Trump. Stop letting Trump, etc. There is only one way Apple is going to survive Trump, Tim Cook. There is only one way Columbia is going to survive Trump, Claire. There is only one way the White House correspondents are going to survive Trump, Eugene Daniels. If you haven't figured it out yet, I'll spell it out. Doing what he wants only tells him you will do what he wants. So he will come back and give you another list of what he wants now. He's a blackmailer. He's a crooked businessman. He's a bully. There is only one way to survive Trump, and that is to destroy Trump's presidency. In a world of Columbias, be a Harvard. In a world of White House correspondents, be the Pentagon correspondents. In a world of Apples, be Walmart. Put your hands on Trump's shoulders and reassure him and knee him in the groin. Instead, Gretchen Whitmer praises Trump. He tricks her into going to a White House photo op. She has to cover her face with her notebook like a damn perp walk. And yesterday, Trump says, yes, he is looking into pardoning the men who were convicted of trying to kidnap her. Instead, Tim Cook sucks up to Trump, and Trump responds by tariffing iPhones 25%. Instead, Claire Shipman and Columbia suck up to Trump, and Trump responds by trying to put a Trump judge, in charge of Columbia's entire curriculum and hiring and admissions. The White House correspondents don't defend the Associated Press, and Trump comes back and takes all their repertorial choices away from them, decides who's going to be on the pool. Iger gives Trump a bribe disguised as a settlement, and Trump threatens to take away Iger's station licenses. Instead, CBS so hoard itself out that its 60 Minutes chief quit, that its news chief quit. Now it is being mocked by the New York Post. The New York Post mocking Sherry Redstone and reporting that her board is flinching at her bribe settlement of Trump because Paramount's insurance doesn't cover bribe settlements. And there may be a congressional investigation of their bribe settlements and civil or criminal charges against her. Instead of doing something, Jake Tapper tries to throw the Trump-Biden debate to Trump by refusing to fact-check him, destroys his own reputation, destroys CNN's reputation, has no space remaining in journalism, so he has to put his name on a Biden acuity book now bombing so badly that to drum up publicity for it, he had to apologize to Lara effing Trump, that he had to go on Piers effing Morgan and insist and actually say, as an adult, as an American, as a supposed TV newscaster, actually say that the Biden story was in many ways a scandal worse than Watergate. Jake Tapper's colleagues at CNN are now refusing to work with him. His career is melting before his eyes. It is so bad, somebody on Twitter wrote that Jake's, quote, book tour is turning into Spinal Tap, where they started out in stadiums and end as openers for a puppet show. Is standing up to Trump pain-free? Hell no. Harvard tells Trump to F off, sues him. He comes back and tries to expel all of their 6,500, 6,600 foreign students, thinking this not only screws the foreigners, but it will also bankrupt Harvard or something. Because, of course, there aren't 6,500 or 6,600 other students turned down by Harvard who wouldn't say yes if they got a new callback. Harvard turned me down in April 1975, and I might still say yes if I got a new callback. And I mean a callback today. So Trump then cuts off $100 million in grants to Harvard and threatens to vet the social media of all foreign students in this country, and he's out of weapons. The classic case of the bully. He'll threaten you, he'll hit you, and then he runs out because he has no backup plan. Now Harvard can keep suing him, and people at Harvard can sleep at night because the point is Trump would have tried to expel the foreign students anyway, and would have cut off the $100 million anyway, soon or late, because that's what he does. That's all he does. That's all he's ever done. He just does it faster to you. If it's obvious to him, you are going to make it easier for him. If you were as crazy and as malicious and as non-human as Trump is, wouldn't you do it that way? If you were Ted Bundy Trump, would you murder the companies that put up a fight or murder the ones that just sit there? What can Harvard now get away with? One of the op-ed people on the student newspaper writes a column saying she knows how to settle this with Trump and his administration. She has challenged Secretary of I Didn't Get Any Education, Linda McMahon, the ex-wife of the wrestling jackass. She has challenged Linda McMahon to settle this in a wrestling cage match. Bravo. One can argue that Harvard's moral victory here, and it's actually 2 or 3 dozen moral victories, are the proverbial pea in the dark suit, a warm feeling nobody notices, but there are also material victories. To contrast the filled with inertia White House Correspondents Association, there are the fightin' Pentagon correspondents. The impeccable Oliver Darcy of the Status newsletter reports that Pete Hegseth tried to strong-arm a CNN producer who had been chosen by her peers to be part of the small pool traveling with the Secretary of Greasy Kid Stuff and Scotch to Singapore. They didn't want Haley Britsky to go. They didn't like her tweets. Seriously. These are alleged grown-ups. I didn't like her tweets. So they banned her. They said, no, you can't go as part of the pool. And her Pentagon media colleagues, unlike the White House Correspondents Association, promptly told the Pentagon press office to F off. Britsky doesn't go, nobody goes. Nobody goes, Hegseth doesn't get to be on TV and in articles. And to thus gaze longingly at himself, he'd have to go back to carrying a dozen mirrors with him at all times. The Pentagon folded like one of Hegseth's cheap suits. Britsky went. A small victory, and presumably if Trump understood what it meant, he'd reproach Hegseth. But this, of course, is way down on the list of things Trump will eventually fire Hegseth for. Certainly when it looks like Hegseth had the Pentagon get the NSA to wiretap people in the Pentagon without the slightest authorization, without the slightest concern for the laws, because F it. What do you expect when you hire the weekend fill-in Fox guy and not some first-string Fox guy? But it underscores the point. The bully is going to hit you. Appease him, he will hit you. Hit him back, he will hit you. But guess which way causes him to stop hitting you fastest? Guess which way causes him the most pain? Tim Cook's response to Trump's threat of a 25% tariff on iPhones should be something equally as crazy. Something like saying, starting September 1st, Apple will no longer sell iPhones in this country. And if you want one, you're going to have to go to the secondary market or into Canada. Fight insanity with more insanity. What, do you think you're obligated to actually stop selling iPhones here just because you say you're going to stop selling iPhones here? This is Trump's America. You can lie all you want. You can deny you ever said it. They can play the tape and you can say, oh, it's AI. The value of all this, of course, is that even if you have made the terrible mistake of appeasing Trump, you can renege, even at this late hour. Claire, pull the plug on the deal Columbia made with him. Iger, tell him you've changed your mind and you're now suing him. CBS Paramount Board, tell Sherry if she wants to settle with Trump, it's going to come out of her paycheck. Do something. This entire dynamic now becomes meaningful, not just a test of moral clarity and whether you remember the lesson the bully in the schoolyard should have taught you, namely the moment he touches you, stab him. Trump is now trying the same bullshit with Putin. Something has happened to him, Putin. He's gone absolutely crazy. It will lead to the downfall of Russia. When that didn't make Putin cry or run home to mommy, Trump escalated. What Vladimir Putin doesn't realize is that if it weren't for me, lots of really bad things would have already happened to Russia. And I mean really bad. He's playing with fire. Firstly, congratulations, Trump. You just confessed that you have been protecting Russia an enemy of this country, a foreign power in opposition to the United States of America. You just confessed. Russia, 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 true, true, true. Treason, treason, treason. Nobody asked. You just confessed. You just confessed you've been covering up for Putin. Good work, stable genius. As in horse stables. Secondly, this will stop Putin in Ukraine. Trump should have just quoted the self-own that Shakespeare put into the mouth of King Lear, the definition of impotence, the summit of empty threats. I will have such revenges on you both that all the world shall. I will do such things. What they are, yet I know not, but they shall be the terrors of the earth. I shall have such revenge on you, Putin. I will do such things, bad things. I mean, really bad. We have a vested interest in Putin not responding to this the way he ordinarily would. Think Russia's inexhaustible supply of open windows. But Putin will probably have a surgical response that humiliates and damages Trump alone, because Trump's tantrum may cause Putin to think that Trump's usefulness to him is about to run out, and he was going to switch to somebody else in a few years anyway. J.B. Vance. Might as well do that now. What's the point of owning the President of the United States if you can't fire the President of the United States? Stop appeasing Trump. And among other reasons to stop appeasing Trump, when you thwart him, when you stand up to him, he dissolves into a self-pitying, soft, stupid child and looks it and sounds it. Apparently, he did not know about TACO. TACO, the new Wall Street acronym about tariffs, the acronym for Trump always chickens out. TACO. When CNBC's Megan Casella asked him about TACO yesterday, and I've telescoped this so you don't have to listen to the whole meltdown, Trump found out about TACO for the first time. Trump don't like TACO.
Wall Street analysts have coined a new term called the taco trade. They're saying Trump always chickens out on your tariff threats, and that's why markets are higher this week. What's your response to that?
I kick out?
Chicken out.
Oh, isn't that nice? Chicken out. I've never heard that. You mean because I reduced China from 145% that I set down to 100 and then down to another? Because of the tariff, because it was so high. But I knew that. But don't ever say what you said. That's a nasty question.
Loser. Taco loser. Oppo taco. It's a baseball joke. Incidentally, as impressive as that CNBC question was, remember, you can always rely on the legacy media here. They will always let you down. Jack Blanchard, the guy who nearly finished destroying Politico Playbook after Ryan Lizza started destroying Politico Playbook before they moved him off, is now a lame duck at Politico Playbook, and he wrote glowingly yesterday of Trump's cooperation with the media. Quote, aside from the lamentable attempt to ban AP, he's basically taken questions from all comers. It's impressive stuff. Yeah, impressive, Governor. Aside from that attempt to ban the world's most widely distributed wire service. Oh, other than that, he's been impressive, taking questions from all comers, trying to ban a news organization. Second time in a week just there, he threatened a reporter over a question he didn't like. That's impressive, Jack Blanchard of Politico. That's impressive. Do you know what happens if he starts getting away with banning the Associated Press or running the White House Correspondents Association? You know what happens? Politico disappears. Jack Blanchard has to go back to London and busk. Meanwhile, on the fascism for money front, Axios reports Stephen Miller and Garden Gnome are angry that their administration of the undead deported just 17,200 people last month. That's actually below past presidential administration averages. Miller and Gnome want 3,000 a day. Not that I'd ever question the motives of such upstanding white trash as Kristi Noem and Stephen Miller. But financial disclosures made public last week revealed that besides Attorney General Blondie, you know who else did work for the GEO Group? The people to call when you need a privately owned, privately operated, vermin-filled concentration camp for immigrants in your neighborhood? You know who else worked for GEO? ICE scum Tom Homan consulted for them for at least 2 years before Trump put him in charge of finding people to put in GEO Group brand concentration camps. What a coincidence. And if you miss this, former nursing home scumbag Paul Walsack as in ballsack, pleads guilty to tax crimes. The judge gives him 18 months, says there, quote, is not a get-out-of-jail-free card for the rich. Then Ballsack's mom, a Trump donor named Elizabeth Fago, it's F-A-G-O. I'm praying it's Fago. Elizabeth Fago gets an invitation to a Trump event at Mar-a-Lago. See if it were, never mind. The invite comes either just before or just after her son is sentenced. There's no get-out-of-jail-free card for the rich. The price for admission to the Trump event is $1 million to Trump. 3 weeks after the dinner, Ballsack, her son, gets a pardon because there is a get-out-of-jail-free card. Of course, it is not free. This story got wildly and widely covered, but I don't remember seeing it connected to a story from 2 years ago this month. Anybody else remember Rudy Giuliani's reported boast that presidential pardons were available for purchase at popular prices without a prescription? $2 million each, half to him, half to Trump. That is what a woman named Noelle Dunphy, who sued Giuliani for sexual abuse, says Giuliani told her in 2019, and she says she has countless recordings of their encounters, and I don't know if she recorded any of the part about the pardons, and I don't know if she's telling the truth, and I have even less of an idea of whether or not Giuliani, was telling the truth about being able to do this. But Dunphy's attorney claimed Giuliani, quote, asked Ms. Dunphy if she knew anyone in need of a pardon, telling her that he was selling pardons for $2 million, which he and President Trump would split. He told Ms. Dunphy that she could refer individuals seeking pardons to him so long as they did not go through the normal channels of the Office of the Pardon Attorney, because correspondence going to that office would be subject to disclosure under the Freedom of Information Act. 2019, pardons for sale, get your pardons here, hot roasted pardons, $2 million apiece. Funny doggone thing, though, huh? Giuliani allegedly boasts of selling pardons for $2 million, $1 million for him, and $1 million for Trump. And 6 years later, Trump pardons Ballsack after Mommy Ballsack attends a fundraiser and buys a ticket to it, which costs $1 million for Trump. Two of Trump's most ridiculous delusions have now merged. Oops. Turns out he threatened Canada before he realized he would need Canada to participate in this science fiction Golden Dome bullshit that Musk must have convinced him to buy. From Musk, I told Canada. You got everybody in Canada just sort of sit still while you talk to them? I told Canada. I told Mars. I told God. I told Jesus. I told my invisible friend Stanley. I told Canada, which very much wants to be part of our fabulous Golden Dome system, that it will cost $61 billion if they remain a separate but unequal nation, but will cost $0 if they become our cherished 51st state. They are considering the offer. Couple notes. One, if you don't have Canadian outposts in your Golden Dome, your Golden Dome would never be aware of missions or flights or missiles coming in from the north, the northeast, or the northwest until about 5-10 seconds before they hit. Canada does not need the Golden Dome. You, Trump, need Canada. 2, Golden Dome's not going to work. The dome idea, Ronald Reagan's Star Wars under a different name, it barely works in Israel. Israel measures 8,522 square miles. The United States measures 3,809,525 square miles. 3, the Golden Dome is at Notre Dame. 4, the only Golden Dome Trump is actually associated with is his hair. And 5, Canada is not, in fact, considering the offer. Also, off the wire, Wired magazine quotes staffers of Nancy Mace, the House whack job who isn't Marjorie Stupid Green or Lauren Boebert. Staffers who say she set up burners on social media to boost her rep. Quoting Wired, quoting a former Mace staffer. We had to make multiple accounts, burner accounts, and go and reply to comments saying things that weren't true, even on Reddit forums. We were congressional staff, and there were actual things we could be doing to help the constituents. Wait, you're telling me Nancy Mace has burner accounts working to help her? And her online persona is still that bad? Man. And then there's this. The last surviving grandson of one of our former presidents has died at the age of 96. Sad news, of course, but is it really news? I mean, a grandson? Well, sir, it's news because the former president he was the last surviving grandson of, that former president left office on March 4th, 1845. I'll say that again. His grandfather, a U.S. president, left office on March 4th, 1845. His grandson died last weekend, 180 years and just under 3 months later. He was the 10th U.S. president. He was President John Tyler, famous because it was he who ascended from the vice presidency when our 9th president, that's 9, single digits, William Henry Harrison, died just 31 days after his inauguration in 1841. His vice president was Tyler. Tyler's grandson just died this past weekend. President Tyler fathered a child, not even his last child. He wasn't even in the White House yet. His third to last child, Lyon Gardner Tyler, fathered when the ex-president was 63 years old. That was in 1853. Lyon Gardner Tyler fathered a son at 75. That would have been on November 9th, 1928, the son was born, and that son was Harrison Ruffin Tyler, and he was the guy who died over the holiday weekend. 3 generations. And you are back to the year President Tyler was born. And the year President Tyler was born was 1790. 3 generations. The last of them just shuffled off. It takes you back to March 29th, 1790. March 29th, 1790, or as we called it around the house, Grandpa's birthday. Also of interest here, by the way, I'm 66. It was not a top 10 priority on my list, but I have in the last, 3 decades regretted not having children. Harrison Ruffin Tyler's father was 75. His father was 63. So send tapes and resumes to... Okay, never mind. Also of interest here, in 2001, Rupert Murdoch fired me personally for reporting a story he didn't like after I had called my bosses and Rupert's office to get the approval to report the story. Now, Rupert Murdoch's chief minions are firing another reporter from their company for reporting another story Trump didn't like. Punchline, the new guy getting the Olbermann treatment did a story last year on me. That's next. This is Countdown.
This is Countdown with Keith Olbermann.
on this edition of Countdown, I've never done this before, but the thing I promise not to tell is going to be exactly the same thing I promised not to tell in the episode of Monday of this week. The same recording, because impossibly between the first running and now, it has become relevant to another media story involving the same company, which you'll hear about in a moment. That's next in Things I Promised Not to Tell. So if you heard Mondays, feel free to skip today's. In fact, feel free to skip today's anyway, even if you didn't hear Mondays. What am I, your boss? First, believe it or not, there's still more new idiots to talk about. The roundup of the miscreants, morons, and Dunning-Kruger effect specimens who constitute the latest other worst persons in the world. The bronze, Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem with 8 new action-adventure dress-up outfits. Ooh, there's a new one. 9 new action-adventure dress-up outfits. From the Associated Press, photos. U.S. Homeland Security Secretary Noem visits Middle East. Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem rides a camel after a tour of Kal-at al-Bahrain Fort. First of all, I can report she did not shoot this animal. So we have slight improvement in the life of Kristi Noem. Secondly, there she is, little turkey arms bared, wearing the headgear and sunglasses traditional in the Middle East, and she's on a camel. Simply put, and the camel you rode in on. Runner-up, Jesse Waters of Fox, Congressman Tim, I'm not all here, am I? Burchett. Waters sent his idiot henchman, that was the role Waters used to perform for Bill O'Reilly, to ask senators and congressmen what they think of Waters' rules for men. Rule 1, wear really weird-looking hair. Burchett, responding to the key Waters rule, which is men don't drink from straws or through straws. They don't use straws. Burchett, I don't drink out of a straw, brother. That's what the women in my house do. Cool? Cool, Burchett. Cool, Waters. Once again, I will point you two idiots to the photo of Waters' old boss at Yankee Stadium from about 12, 13 years ago, drinking a milkshake through a straw during a baseball game while sitting next to another guy drinking a milkshake through a straw, a guy named Donald Trump. Congratulations, Congressman Burchett, on calling Donald Trump a woman because he used a straw on a milkshake. But the winners, the scumbag New York Post, owned by scumbag Rupert Murdoch and its scumbag editor-in-chief Keith Poole. Once again, Rupert Murdoch's real name is Keith. He hired an editor-in-chief for the Post named Keith. They doing me dirty. And this story hits so close to home. Lachlan Cartwright's site Breaker, that's Lachlan Cartwright, who is not named Keith, reports the Post is burying a story that would have embarrassed Trump and revealed that his pick to run the DEA had reportedly led 2 operations that led to unnecessary deaths. And then Poole, Murdoch, and the Post essentially firing the reporter who broke the story after they buried his story, that they told him to proceed on. A 16-year veteran of the Post, no less. Let me quote Cartwright's report at some length here. It was a pretty amazing scoop, Josh Cosman explained to the Breaker. Cosman briefed multiple editors at the Post, including the business, features, and political editors, who all encouraged him to pursue the story. But there were early signs of external pressure. I was told by a White House press person that Caroline Leavitt was looking at this real carefully, Cosman told Breaker about conversations he was having with the White House about Cole, that's the DEI guy. After clearing several hurdles, including getting 2 on-record sources and speaking to more than a dozen former top officials, the story was written, edited, and slated to run on Sunday, March 22nd, but it continued to be pushed off till later in the week. Eventually, Cosman emailed the Post's political editor to ask for an update. There's no good way to say this, so I'll just say it. Keith Poole spiked the story. The Post's political editor emailed Cosman March 27 in an email obtained and reviewed by Breaker. The bombshell email went on to say, I sent him the most recent copy and his response was, nope, not running this, in a way that made clear there was no changing his mind, the editor wrote. I'm very sorry, I thought we had the story, but sometimes decisions are made above my pay grade. Yeah, that sounds familiar, too. 2 weeks later, on April 11th, Cosman met with the Post's business editor and was told that he would either have to submit to a performance improvement plan or take some time to seek another job. He acknowledged that Keith Poole had issues with some recent stories, Cosman told Breaker. On April 29th, CNN published a story about Cole under the headline, Ex-Agents Question Role of Trump's DEA Pick in Violent Overseas Incidents, detailing many of the allegations that were in Cosman's story. For what it's worth, we clearly were ahead on the story, Cosman emailed the political editor. In fact, we still have more info in our spiked story than CNN's, though the takes are pretty similar. Yeah, I know, Josh, the political editor responded 19 minutes later. I always believed in the story, but sometimes decisions are made above my head. Unfortunately, when Keith takes actions like this, you are catching and killing the story, Cosman told Breaker. Then 2 weeks later, you're telling me to get out. I certainly interpreted it as retaliation. The timing struck me as not coincidental. On Tuesday afternoon, just hours after Breaker approached Poole for comment, Cosman was suspended from the New York Post with full pay. So let's recap. The reporter Cosman asked what the rules were, told his bosses, told the story, followed their rules, and then the paper buried his story and buried him anyway. As I will relate after this break, Murdoch himself did this to me in 2001, although because he was on vacation, when I broke the story, he wasn't around to bury it. So the story ran, and I followed all their rules, and they fired me anyway. And the punchline to this, when a New York Post reporter called me last September to say they were about to update the RFK Jr. sexting with a New York Magazine reporter story, they're going to update this by claiming that I had lived with that reporter, Olivia Nuzzi. The Post reporter was, same guy, Cosman. And I did what you have to do in that situation. I put the story on Twitter immediately saying, yes, this is true. I did not do what the Post did when Cosman came up with the truth and another great story, kill it and off him. So, the New York Post, editor Keith Poole, and Rupert Scumbag Murdoch, today's worst persons in the world, mate. The number one story on the countdown and my favorite topic, me and things I promised not to tell. Over the weekend, watching hockey, I had occasion to invoke my days hosting the baseball game of the week and the World Series for Fox, and it reminded me of the delightful way that ended, with me being paid $100,000 a month not to do anything. I have changed jobs a lot, and seldom have the departures included gold watches and going away parties. At least not going away parties to which I was invited. But in 43 years in radio and television, I have only actually been fired in the traditional sense of go clean out your desk and get out twice. Once, the order was from a drunken radio executive who did not like the fact that I was 21 years old, and he was overruled, and he was sent home with a warning by his bosses hours later, and I was back on the job 48 hours after that. The other time, when it actually happened, you're fired, clean out your desk, that was, unsurprisingly, at the hands of Rupert Murdoch and Fox, and I mean Rupert Murdoch personally, or so he claims. When I finally convinced NBC News that I was serious about no longer hosting its Monica Lewinsky-a-thon in 1998, the head of NBC Sports, Dick Ebersol, had an ingenious solution. He knew his friends at Fox Sports longed to have me front their version of SportsCenter, and so he proposed the following. NBC would give my agent 10 days in which to negotiate two deals. A deal for me to go to L.A. and host Fox Sports News and Major League Baseball on Fox, and another deal in which Fox would pay NBC $1 million for my contract, like I was a mediocre baseball pitcher. Amazingly, it worked. I got what was then a record-breaking salary for any cable sportscaster ever. NBC got its $1 million, and maybe most startlingly, NBC then asked me to stay on the air as a lame duck at MSNBC for like 6 weeks. Curiously, throughout my career, no matter how abrasive the exit, my lame duck employers have always, for some reason, trusted me to stay on their air even though I was leaving. In local news in Los Angeles once, I did this for 3 months. Anyway, at first, going to work at Fox Sports was a delight. Their news guys, the evil Roger Ailes and his henchman John Moody, pitched me on doing stuff for them, maybe co-anchoring with Bill O'Reilly. I'm serious. I passed. Sports, we spent money. I worked with friends. I didn't have to talk about politics. I could narrate highlights. I could do funny voices from way downtown. Bang. I lived on the beach. I mean, my next-door neighbor was Hawaii. Every time there was a newspaper story about ESPN, even though our ratings were terrible, there was also my picture in it with a caption like, "Challenging ESPN." It was great. But then, 2 things happened. The Fox guy who knew we needed 5 years at minimum just to tie ESPN in the ratings took me to lunch one day and said, "Sorry, mate, my missus is moving back to England tomorrow, with or without me, so I'm going. Good luck." He was replaced by guys who replaced the 5-year plan with a 5-week plan to raise the ratings by, literally, 1/5 of 1 point. I left that meeting in which they explained their suicidal plan and revealed that my salary represented an unsustainable 20% of their entire budget, and I called my real estate agent and put my house on the beach up for sale. Not long after, my doctor gave me a physical and a warning. Cut back on work and stress and everything else, or you can have a heart attack 10 years from now. I told my bosses this, and their response was to blackmail me. "We have a clause in your contract which allows us to send you on the road once a week while you are still working 5 days in the studio. We're going to enforce that unless you kick back 2/3 of your salary." They put this in a document. There are, as the kids say, receipts. So I folded to blackmail because 2/3 of $3 million a year is still pretty good. But I kept doing the job. In 1999, I broke a story that everybody laughed at, that Michael Jordan was unhappy in retirement and he wanted to come back to play in the NBA, but instead of getting a salary, he wanted an ownership stake in a team. 2 years later, he did exactly that. In 2000, I got to host the first Mets-Yankees World Series, and hosting baseball every Saturday on Fox was a pretty good gig. And we were just gearing up for the 2001 baseball season when I got a tip on April 20th that the owners of the Los Angeles Dodgers had unofficially put their team up for sale. And in fact, they were talking to the old owners, the O'Malley family, about taking the Dodgers off their hands, selling the Dodgers back to the son of Walter O'Malley. This was a great scoop, but it had great danger because the owners of the Dodgers were Fox, my own employers. The next day, after getting this scoop, I made about 100 phone calls, and sure enough, I got the friend of a friend of a friend of my agent to confirm that he and his family were in preliminary discussions joining the O'Malleys to buy the Dodgers from Fox. 2 sources, great scoop. And that night, I reached out to my bosses and said, "What the hell do we do here? The story is solid. The Dodgers are for sale. But look, this is your candy store, and I do work for you, and if you don't want me to report this, I'm obviously not going to report it. And I'm not going to pout, and I'm not going to give the story to somebody else." My bosses replied, "Good for you. Why don't we all get on the phone with the top? Rupert Murdoch has his own personal News Corp public relations department. Let's see what he says." So on Sunday, April 22nd, 2001, we got Murdoch's own PR guy on the blower, and I explained it to him. Well, Mr. Murdoch has a policy about this. He never interferes in editorial decisions, not even in sourced business stories, not even if they involve him. So long as you make it clear your sources are not from within the company, and so long as you're confident in your sources, and so long as you include our denial, You should proceed with this Dodgers story. That is what we are paying you for. For a brief moment, I thought, maybe I have misjudged Rupert Murdoch. Well, it turned out to be a very brief moment and a very wrong moment. I reported the story that night. Howls of denials. 5 days later, though, the Long Beach Press-Telegram newspaper had its own story, said, despite denials, Dodgers are for sale, with far more details than I had. And that really was the end of it. The team was unofficially for sale. Dodger fans who hated what Fox had done to the team seemed happy, and the vast, stinking pile of burning excrement that was Fox and News Corp and Murdoch sailed on unperturbed. But 12 days after that, just before I was getting in my car to go to the first Fox baseball meeting for our 2001 season coverage, the president of Fox Sports, yet another Aussie called David Hill, called my agent and told her, Keith's not doing any baseball for us this year. Business decision. Click. End of conversation. Nothing else. No firing, no get out, no clean out your desk, no announcement. But then, 2 days later, they turned off my access to the Fox computer system, and 4 days after that, they called and canceled my cable show. And then that night, I got 2 weird calls from Rich Sandomir, who was the TV sports critic and TV sports business reporter for the New York Times. And Rich asks me, so did you know you got fired by Rupert Murdoch personally? And I said, with genuine astonishment, that I not only didn't know that, but even given my thoughts about Rupert Murdoch, I didn't believe that. Well, that's what my sources at Fox tell me. Apparently your Dodger story really pissed him off, but really... And I said I had cleared it through his personal PR guy. I don't know, Rich Sandomir said. Apparently he was on vacation, and he got back like the 9th of this month, and he read all these stories about the Dodgers being for sale and how Fox Sports was the first to report it, and he called up David Hill, and he told Hill to fire you immediately. So I told Rich, this is the first I have heard of this, and I still don't believe it, even though the day he mentioned, May 9th, was the day David Hill had called my agent and told her I would not be doing baseball for Fox that year. An hour later, the phone rings again, and it's Rich Sandomir again, and he sounds shaken. I got it wrong. I don't have any sources at Fox who told me Rupert fired you personally. My source said that you were telling people Rupert had fired you personally over the Dodger story. And I gave Rich a sequence of, well, kind of friendly uh-huhs. And I said, no, I didn't. And no, you've never been dumb enough in your life to make the mistake you're saying you just made. And he said, well, I never said somebody at Fox said Murdoch fired you. Okay, thanks, bye. The next day they had me come into the Fox building on Pico Boulevard and clean out my office while a guard watched. And she was a really nice guard. In fact, she brought donuts. What a lovely way to go out. As I packed, I thought more and more of what had happened in the month since I had gotten that tip about the Dodgers being for sale. As I left the Fox lot for the last time, as an employee, I went back a couple of times to attend table reads for The Simpsons. Table reads for The Simpsons were much more fun than being an employee at Fox. I called a couple of reporters I knew and my agent and some people in the business, and we tried to put together a timeline that made some sort of sense. Because the slow motion firing thing, May 9th, you're not doing baseball. May 11th, your computer won't work. May 15th, your cable show is canceled. May 16th, clean out your office. A week-long firing made no sense. Until one reporter friend said, you know, Fox called me and said, call Keith up and provoke him. Get him to call us names. Tell him about this story in that paper calling him washed up. Get him going. And then it all clicked. My contract ran through the end of the year 2001. Because Fox was firing me without any cause or even claiming there was a cause, without any violation of my contract or their rules, because I had left a trail of good behavior on the Dodger story, they were trying to enrage me and get me to say something nasty that itself would be a violation of my contract so they could outright fire me and keep the money. And the money still on the contract was about $800,000. Now, after decades of contemplating this, I am confident that I am no crazier than the next guy. At least not the next guy in television. But on my worst craziest, least rational day. If you said you have two choices, Olbermann, you can blow up these people who are firing you, and you can make them look bad in a newspaper for a day, and then they'll fire you and keep all the money they owe you, or you can keep your big bazoo shut for just 7 months. You can keep the $800,000, and you can spend the summer doing whatever the hell you want, and you can then spend the rest of your natural life blowing these people up. If that's the choice, I will always take the scenario that gives me the $800,000 for doing nothing. Always. So, on January 1st, 2002, after the last Fox check cleared, I began making a professional avocation out of attacking Fox News, Fox Sports, Fox Business, Fox Murdoch, Fox O'Reilly, Fox Tucker Carlson, whatever, and I got the $800,000. But there lingered for years this kind of academic question of whether Rupert Murdoch had actually fired me for having followed the rules set out by his own personal PR guy. As usual, these things resolve themselves when you least expect them to. Murdoch was speaking at a Dow Jones conference in Carlsbad, California on May 28th, 2008. 7 years to the month they got rid of me. And a story came across the wire with my name on it. The guy interviewing him at this conference talked about whether there should be dissenting voices on Fox, quote, news, unquote, like that guy who was killing it on MSNBC, Keith Olbermann. "Now," Murdoch barked, "I fired him 5 years ago. He was crazy." Timing was off, but there it was. Rupert Murdoch confessing in front of a crowd that he fired me personally. The red badge of courage, in quotes. I wondered if it still pissed him off that he had to pay me the $800,000 when I didn't take the grievance bait. 3 years after that, Murdoch said it again, like I hadn't heard it the first time. On February 1st, 2011, Rupert Murdoch was interviewed by his business talking head, Neil Cavuto, who for some reason asked him if he would consider hiring me to put me on Fox News. "No, we fired him once. We don't believe in firing people twice." Cavuto replied, "You called him a nut." "Well, he was a nut we had him on Late Night Fox Sports." There was never any such show called Late Night Fox Sports, but never mind. Roop went on. "It was impossible. I fired him. He was crazy." Fired me for following his rules. And I was the one who was crazy. Finally, speaking of crazy, I have had for 63, nearly 64 years now, a love-hate relationship with the name Keith. But did you know that Rupert Murdoch's real first name is also Keith? But that rather than call himself Keith, he voluntarily chooses to call himself Rupert. I mean, sure, my name is Keith, but at least my name ain't freaking Rupert. I've done all the damage I can do here, but not as much as Rupert Murdoch has. Welcome to the club, Mr. Kosman. Thank you for listening. Brian Ray and John Philip Chanel, musical directors of Countdown, have arranged, produced, and performed most of the music. Mr. Chanel on orchestration, keyboards, Mr. Ray on guitars, bass, drums. It was produced by TKO Brothers. Our satirical and pithy musical comments, sometimes known as pithy and satirical, are by the best baseball stadium organist ever, Nancy Faust, now back with the Chicago White Sox in the Chicago White Sox Nancy Faust Lounge for limited engagement only. The sports music is the Olbermann theme from ESPN2, which was written by Mitch Warren Davis and appears courtesy of ESPN Inc. Other music arranged and performed by the group No Horns Allowed. And speaking of music, my announcer today was my friend Stevie Van Zandt. Everything else was, as ever, my fault. It's countdown for today, day 130 of America Held Hostage, just 1,333 days until the scheduled end of his lame duck and lame brain term, unless Putin removes him sooner, or the actuarial tables do, or we do. Stop compromising with Trump. The next scheduled countdown is Monday. As always, bulletins as the news warrants. Remember, he's laying the groundwork now to not leave office later. We must stop him. Till next time, I'm Keith Olbermann. Good morning, good afternoon, good night, and good luck.